All right, you ready?
Yeah, Ben.
You're waiting on me.
I don't know.
Let me just a little bit.
I don't know. We've just been doing our thing. I'm not worried
Just,
about it. I
just
just
the
figure if
two
I
of
don't say
us.
anything, we'll just be goofing around for another hour and be like, "Oh yeah, we're supposed to record something."
Just the two of us.
We can make it.
We
if
can
we
make it
try.
if we try. Just the two of us. Welcome back to the Aviation RC Noob Podcast. You found us. My name is Joe.
And I'm Matt.
We're here to be with you along your journey and to share our experiences in RC aviation. If you have any questions, thoughts, or want to share a flight story, hit us up at aviationrcnoob@gmail.com. Now, buckle in. Let's take off. And we're back. Welcome back to episode 44. Looks like today we're going to be talking about night flights and RC lighting. Matthew, how you been doing, bud?
I'm doing good, man. How about you, Joe?
I'm hanging in there. You were wanting to, I guess, get into putting lights on your models, on your planes, and in preparation for that, because you hadn't taken that step yet. You wanted to kind of go into what it means and what it takes to fly at night, the rules around all that, and then a little bit of prep info on putting lights on your plane. Am I understanding that right?
Yeah, that's pretty fair. I've been looking at that for a long while. And as I build this Marabou, I'm like, I'm a quiet night away from closing that model up with a plastic skin, and I don't want to redo it later. So I wanted to have it so it's a nice, easy glider to just chill out at dusk with. And then as it turns into night, just like if it's nice, then I'm going to enjoy it. But to do that, I need lights.
Yeah.
And so I want to build them in, and that's a good foray because it's a glider. So it should just be, it shouldn't be any skin off anything's nose to get it working. So I figured it'd be a good model to start with.
Nice. All right. Well, before we dive into all that, why don't we take a short bit and talk about what we've been doing, like we always do.
Yeah, of course. How about, look, let me start, because then you can say what you've been working on, and then I'm going to get into all the other junk. So,
sure. But I want to do a touch of house cleaning before we actually go into that. I'm sorry, I meant to.
Oh, that's okay.
Just enough to say, I apologize for last episode. And I know, Matt, you'll say, "Oh, don't worry about it." But
that's okay.
I had done some adjusting. I was working on some gain on my microphone, and so if you heard issues, it was me clipping on my microphone. So
complaints go to Joe at aviationrcnoob.com.
Yeah, I'll take that one this time.
Only on the last episode. On episode 43, if you didn't like it, you can just blame Joe.
That's right. So hopefully I've got that rectified. I shouldn't be blowing my mic out this time.
No, I think we'll be all right.
All right. So Matt, what you been working on?
I've been working. So I've been working on a lot of the same stuff. Really trying to get the Prandtl. Really working on like the submissions for the Hangar RC Build Challenge. So I'm trying to get them in the air and get some decent footage, get some really good footage. Is what I was trying to do. And I had varying degrees of success with it. I submitted the Prandtl D wing, which I've got some footage for. I've got some great plans. It's one of those ones I've been wanting to make. I would love it to be a kit, so I thought that's what a great opportunity to put that in there. And I have a flight test style, which I've built, and I just haven't really flown, so and gotten some good footage of at least. So I've been trying to get that in the air, and every time I do, it doesn't want to turn left to save its life. I mean, it does a little bit, and I think it's after doing a couple different tests here and there, like it would just do. I mean, I literally flew for probably about 3 minutes doing circles all the way out to the road, and it's pretty far away. So Um, and I just couldn't get it to, no matter how much I turned to the left or whatever, it just wasn't doing it.
Right.
Um, and maybe it's because I don't know. I don't think it's overturning. Anyway, I might have had the motor too high, and the torque from the 2212, was it a 2200 kV motor with a 5-inch prop is what's on it. Um, you're putting that up there. I think it might have had too much torque, and it kept like trying to turn it to the right. And I guess the control surfaces aren't big enough to counteract that, maybe, or but you know, when the motor was low, I was able to fly it okay. When I gave it another go today. I also put a pod on there on the bottom, which actually worked out great because it's something to hold on to and launch with. Um, and I can put the battery far enough up that I don't need any ballast. I just have the battery, which is awesome. It makes it lighter.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a success. But unfortunately, I also went out today with a little bit of time, and of course, everybody's there. So what do? Is I hand launch it and I dink it into the ground and bust the nose off, and it's like, oh.
No,
And then by
man.
the time I got it back into the air, everybody else like, oh, I gotta go, you know. And so they don't see like the success; they just see me dinking the plane on the ground.
Yeah, there goes Matt
Yeah,
dinking another
I'm
one.
telling you, that's got to be what they think, you know. The Marabou is ready. I actually went through and reinforced the center former. So the very first former, I doubled up, and then I double checked a couple of the other things. I also pulled off. I set up one wing as it was originally, as I designed it, with like a triangular spar. And the second one, I said, you know, I don't think I need the triangle. I think it's going to be strong enough with the 3 barbecue campfire skewers. So I left those there. So I basically went through and kind of undid the triangle so that they're the same.
Okay.
And so now I'm truly at the point where I have to decide, you know, am I going to put lights in this thing? Because that was kind of one of the things I was thinking would be really neat. Is put lights in it so that I could fly it at dusk and just kind of glide it around until it got dark, and you know, bring it in at my leisure and enjoy it. But it's going to have a plastic skin, and I didn't want to have to like undo it to put lights in later after it flies, and then you know, and then kind of like maybe mess up everything and have to redo the whole plane. So I figured, well, let me actually put lights in, and that's kind of where all of this started. And then I also got the Tiny Hawk 2 Freestyle. I mentioned I had it come in for around Christmas time, and I hadn't really had a chance to mess with it. Well, this past couple weeks, I have been able to get it out and get it flying, and I took it out to the park a little bit with moderate success. I've been rolling around my yard a little bit, and I took it out to the field today, and enjoyed doing a little bit of, I'll call it gate flying. I don't know, flying a little bit low and under things, and but it's a fast, agile plane or agile craft. So, you know, the quadcopter goes into the air at like 25% throttle. So the hover window is pretty small.
Yeah.
So I might have to do a little bit of moving the expo around a little bit, and I might be able to then fly it a little bit easier to do more, I'll call it gate flying, or more racing style flight. But it was a lot of fun. It's been a great craft. I also pulled out the old one, the Tiny Hawk 2, just a regular one. And I got that working, and it's working pretty good. So I'll probably take that and, you know, goof that around the yard and have some fun with that there. It's got protected props, so I could do it if the kids are around, you know, running in the yard or something. I might be able to zoom it around the other half of the yard or something. Because I'm not gonna injure anybody with it. So, yeah, I mean, that's what I've been up to. So, no, I've injured my back a couple weeks ago, and you know, I've really just been recovering from that. There's definitely no, the little Cessna is a lot of climbing around and bending down and grabbing stuff, and I can't do that with a bad back. So I've been kind of just laying off the full scale stuff for now until I heal. It's killing me, but I'd rather do that and do it right when I get a chance to get back to it. So, but that's it. What about you, Joe?
Well, it's gonna sound crazy. I'm actually currently looking through a 3D program trying to find a object I imported. Well, really issue. Looking for that huge program I was working on running. Anyway,
Well,
it finished.
yeah, but it's tied into
So,
what's the news? Because there's
all
news.
right, sorry. Yeah, so let's see. Last 2 weeks, so the Friday night before the episode went live, I was up pretty much all night finishing up editing. There was a bit of an impromptu build party, I think, and then
there was supposed to be. The
and
one
then
was, and then the next week, I flaked. I fell asleep. I got tired. Sorry.
I think that was the week before. I think I just fired up and said, "Hey, I'm building."
Yeah.
Anyway, so I got the Nubatros finished up that night while I was editing the episode.
Mm-hmm.
And I was up until like 4 o'clock that morning, doing finalizations of all that.
Mm-hmm.
And I went out the next day to Maiden It with my a youth pastor from my church. He was wanting to see it, and so I went out there and got out there and got the plane pulled out and hooked all up, and his kids came out, his wife came out, and everybody's all excited, and I realized I'd left the batteries on the table in the garage.
You pulled a Matt Allen.
Yeah, you did do that one time, man, and I think I gave you a hard time about it too.
I know, right? Well, I deserved it at the time, and I think you deserve the Reuben now, but it happens.
Yep.
It's really what it comes down to. Like today, I went out, I had 2 batteries, one to power the goggles and one to power the plane. I didn't think I might need another. And so when I did need the other, I was out of recording piece, like I couldn't record FPV.
Right.
So I was like, oh man. Anyway, but yeah, it happens. So, but it's always disappointing.
Yeah. So anyway, fortunately, he was gracious enough that I ran back home. I lived like 20 minutes away, grabbed my batteries, and came back out. And we decided we were going to go ahead and put it in the air. Now he had a nice big open field that was a farmer's that was out by his place. It had been cut down, so it was pretty decent to fly at. But it was very windy. But I knew this was going to be my one chance to get in the air. But what I thought was supposed to be like 10, 15 mile an hour winds was probably considerably more. That or just 15 mile an hour winds is scarier than I thought it was. When you're trying to put something in the air.
Yeah, especially when it's brand new.
Yeah. So, I didn't tell you this because I was saving all these stories for when we sat down to record. I had him hand launch it for me. And so I said, got to hold it right, hold the wings level, give it some up tilt so you're not darting it into the ground. And, I throttled up and I said, okay, when I go, when I say go, I'm going. And what I didn't tell him was to chuck it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I throttled up hard. And I started, all right, here we go. And he go. And it not his fault.
He
pretty
like
much
airplane,
just let it go.
Paper airplane toss.
Yeah, just barely, or just like let the plane go, let it come out of his hand on its under its own power. And immediately I saw what happened, so I cut the throttle and it just belly landed. And I said, okay, that was entirely my fault. I need you to chuck it a bit.
Right.
So it's a big plane. I gotta get like big wingspan. I need to get some movement to get in the air. And then the next hand launch, it was in the air.
Good.
Now, remember I told you that it was yardsticks, wooden yardsticks I was using as a wing spar.
Yeah. On the flat way, right? Like it's not like up and down that would keep it stiffer, I guess, on a long thing. It was flat because you wanted a thin profile.
Right, thin profile of the wing. Now, what that resulted in is there could be some flex in the wing, and boy howdy, those wings flex. We were both laughing and cackling the whole time because it looked like the plane was up there just flapping its wings. The wind was beating it so bad. Those wings, I thought I was going to break the wings mid-flight.
Okay.
But fighting the wind, and I couldn't even tell you how it was handling because I never backed off the throttle. It was just full controls in any direction, fighting the wind to bring it around. And after a minute or two, I belly landed it. We walked out, picked it up, kind of had a look at it, but I had lined the whole underside with tape because I knew that it had rained I didn't want moisture getting to it on a belly land. So yeah, it handled the landing just fine. We did another takeoff right there, and
Cool.
I decided to get it up a ways to get it into some cleaner air. Still decent winds, but it'd be cleaner. I was fighting it for some reason. It got a little further away from me than I wanted. I was working on bringing it back. I lost orientation on it a couple times, so you saw a glider up there doing some loop-de-loops before I finally was trying to bring it back in. Thought I was going to clear this tree that was over here, and did not. Yeah, one wing ejected out of the fuse on impact. The other one is what ultimately kept it hung up in the tree, because this was a 44, 45 inch wing sticking off the side of this
just
fuse.
the one side, right?
Yeah. And so between that and the tail, we spent 45 minutes trying to get it out of the tree. And when we finally got it out,
what before you get too far, being that high, what were the thoughts that went through your head, and what were the methods that you were thinking, okay, this is probably our best bet? And what'd you end up using?
Neither of those I can talk about. The thought process was, let me throttle it up and see if I can maybe pop it out.
Yeah, jostle it out.
And it would not. And so what we ultimately ended up doing should not be done. But he pulled out his 8-foot ladder, I think, and got out a roller pole, like you're rolling the walls of your house.
Yeah, or the ceiling or whatever, yeah.
And extended that out to max, ended up putting a roller on the top for a little more, and then we found a bungee cord out there that we worked on bungee cording, and then lanyard from my transmitter neck strap, tying and wrapping a like another 6-foot stick to the end of this pole to finally. And he was, again, this is not something suggested to do. I didn't even want him up that high because he was the one on the ladder. He insisted. But he was on the very, very top of the ladder, and I was holding it. I said, dude, if you come off this ladder, your wife's going to kill me.
Right.
So definitely not recommended. And it took us a long time, but we finally got the plane out. And that's when I found out, I don't know if I talked about it much on air, but I put a wooden coupler in the fuselage that the wings slotted into.
Yeah, you talked about it a little bit.
Okay. So that cracked.
Okay.
That was the main damage. One wing took a big branch impact, but it would have been fine. But within the motor, I broke the prop, but the tail section was fine. Everything else was fine, but that coupler inside snapped. And that's going to be a process to get into. So I didn't have time to rebuild it or get in there and fix it and try to maiden it again before the end of the deadline. So.
Okay.
But it
did you get
fly.
any video of it flying, as messy as it might have been?
Or
a picture
tried.
or two?
No, not really. So I didn't pull my phone out and I could have handed my phone to one of the kids and said, one of the kids that he had out there that's little toddler age, 6-year-old.
Or even just have him like, hey, take a couple pictures. No, didn't think that far ahead, did you?
Nope. And well, here's the thing. I had the FPV on it. Like, I mounted the FPV camera.
Okay.
I took the goggles. I strapped the goggles to the head of one of the kids.
Oh, right.
And was like, here, you get to fly with the plane.
Right.
And, you get to watch this. But I said, oh, wait, I didn't hit record. Let me take it back. I hit record. The red numbers started ticking. I was good. And I handed it back, put that back on the kid's head. And then we went. Now.
Right, but it's possible they would have hit the button on adjusting on their head and maybe turning it back off. Or the file, like if you forgot to turn it off, I think on those goggles, if you forget to pause it or stop it, it doesn't finish the file. Like, whatever. So you may have, like, I don't know. It could be a lot of things, sadly. Until you are really familiar with the goggles, you won't know.
What ultimately happened was I got the goggles back from the kid, and it wasn't recording.
Oh,
and I checked the saved videos, and it went all the way back to the Corsair videos.
okay.
So there was nothing. And I don't know. I don't know what happened. I know the kids were, as they were handling the goggles, they were hitting buttons a lot.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's kids.
Yeah, it's kids. I'm not upset at that.
How about the silver lining of this? Like, did the kids really enjoy having the goggles on? We're like, whoa, cool.
Yeah, the one that was in the goggles, he
Yeah.
thought it was amazing.
Yeah, cool. Well, congratulations. You just
Yeah,
you did it.
yeah. I just didn't get my footage,
Yeah,
so
well,
but that's okay. So yeah, that's the state of that. I do want to revisit it, but with the submission deadline passed, the urgency on that has dropped a bit, and I squirreled. I had a shower thought. I had a
Awesome.
squirrel thought. Squirrel thought. Wow. I had a shower thought one morning that I've spent a couple days contemplating on, and I spoke with you a bit about it. And long story short, there's now a DJI Phantom 3 Pro sitting in the back of my car
Okay.
that I purchased off my campus
Oh,
pasture.
right,
It was
yeah.
his. Yeah, so Joe's into quads and has a camera quad and a very nice camera quad used that I picked up at a pretty good price.
Nice.
And so the last week, yeah, pretty much all last week over the weekend, yesterday was all just looking into what can I do with the drones and quads, and specifically in the direction of side gig is why I got it. You know, what can I do with it? What can I what services can be offered with them? And so I've been looking at orthomosaic mapping and agricultural stuff and
Oh man, you went
image
deep.
analysis. Oh, buddy. I mean, big time. And then today started listening to a video while I was on the road dealing with Part 107.
Oh yeah.
Prepping for Part 1, prepping to go take the Part 107 in the near future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, did
was-
you share a link of that down?
Yes, it's down in the bottom of the show notes.
Fantastic. That way everybody can, if you're interested in learning more, Joe was saying that this video pretty much covers all the older stuff because it's like 4 years old or so, right?
Yeah, it's 4 or 5, and it was like the 107 guide, I guess. It was basically a guy went and took what could be $300 or $400 of classwork at the time and made a video
Mhm.
covering it all for the Part 107 at the time. Now, with it being 4 or 5 years old, some things have changed. So
Right.
this is still a good one to.
It'll get most of it. And then,
Yeah.
you can look around and there's other people kind of filling in the gap of the old versus new.
And the comment sections actually, will say, this is pretty good. Here's some topics to make sure you're up to speed on. But supposedly some folks have watched this and gone and taken a test and still been doing like 75s and 80s, which is enough to pass. But I don't want to just do 75 or 80. I want to be up to speed, but most of the information is still relevant, and then there's some holes to fill in over the last 5 years.
Right. Okay.
So
Yeah. I know they've been updating as they kind of go, but I mean, most of the stuff is basically I'll call it a basic airman certificate, because when you got the Part 107 back then, you were essentially a limited airman, which is basically a pilot,
yeah.
And you were limited obviously to remote UAS. UASs. But still, they wanted you to have, I'll call it a basic core knowledge.
Yeah, and buddy, by core knowledge,
It's
if
involved.
if you've not looked into 107 at all, and I hadn't really. I mean, so far, and I'm a little over an hour in, we've looked at just drone flight rules, visibility rules, height requirements. We've looked at airspace classes.
Mhm.
We've looked
Being
at
able to read sectional maps.
Yes, sectional maps was a big one,
And
and there was some serious time spent on that. How
mhm.
to identify the airspaces, how to read them, how the questions will be posed. And there's just a ton of information on those. Uh, Actually, the multi-com, single com, frequencies and such. And what is the METAR? METAR,
METAR.
MOTAR,
METAR.
METAR?
It's man, I should be like able to blah out all the. It's a
Yeah, it's basically the
meteorological and blah blah blah
meteorological report. Yeah.
radar stuff. Yeah,
Hmm.
it's a report, and it's basically like it's Greek,
Until you know what it means.
right? And it's basically done to economize on radio airtime.
Hmm.
Is really what it is. So that they basically say, hey, in these short blips of information, you should be able to get basically a solid enough picture of what's going on in the air around you to be able to make informed decisions as a pilot, both where you're going and where you might be going from. Like, yeah. So it's a lot. There's a lot in there.
There is, but now I mean, just
But how much do you really
quick.
need to know as a remote pilot? That is,
I mean,
I have yet to see it entirely, but I get it. They want you to understand what's available, and you should be able to use those things because they're very valuable. If you
yeah.
want to know what's coming, forecast wise, the METARs are great.
Hmm. Yeah. So all that looping back to what I was talking about earlier, which was one of the things that you can do with the drones that I'm looking at is orthomosaic photography, which is basically mapping
Mm-hmm.
of an area. Fly the drone up, point the camera straight down, fly a pattern, take pictures, and then process through software to line it all up and make a bigger image that would be a map of an area. And then you can even run it through other software that will do more things to analyze it, or even give you a 3D reconstruction of the area off the pictures. And so that's what I was running pre-show before we got recording, and was still going as we got started. And that was it's done. So yeah. Anyway, that's all I was commenting on, since you and I were talking about it beforehand.
Yeah.
It did export, so it took so long because it ended up exporting an object, which
Okay.
is which I've tried to open in Blender, and it imported, but I don't see it anywhere. So I'll have to mess with this later.
Yeah. 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 During the show as we record, although there may be plenty of time while I talk about some of these subjects, maybe not the best. Optimal time for you to concentrate on what's going on there.
That's right.
That's all. Before I get too far, I forgot the Sky Javelin. It's one of my submissions to the build off. I basically submitted the two things. The Sky Javelin was basically looks like an airliner, but like a dart shaped airliner. And I was able to get it up into the air and fly it, but poorly. And I was thinking, it needs a bigger, more powerful prop. And so there was good news in that. And there was a couple, like I did the landing gear thing again, and it works again, which is great.
Nice.
Yeah, it made me really happy. The problem is that apparently it's not high enough. And the prop, when it started to basically level out, the prop would hit. And so I'm like, oh, man.
Cut the grass.
Yeah, I was like, I don't need to be trimming the grass. It's already short enough. And so I ended up busting one prop and the whole front end and one of the strikes. I was like, I got to rebuild it. So I rebuilt it. And when I rebuilt it, I may have accidentally put too much down thrust angle. I couldn't see it, like looking at it, but I may have, because when I got it, I basically, I tried to get it up in the air again and it had the same issue. I put a little bit larger prop, kept striking on the ground. I did redo the landing gear so it's taller, so it wouldn't strike, but it still did. So I was like, all right, I'm going to pick it up, and with any luck, I'll do a toss and it'll be great. And I think you may have seen the video. I don't think I'm ever going to hand toss again. I think I'm done. If I have to hand toss, I'm just going to break my plan in half and just go home.
Just
because it's just save the event.
I don't understand
it either. It's just I never have a chance at it. It's just awful. So Yeah, so basically I dunked it into the ground and it kind of like bounced and like leveled out a little bit enough where it survived the first one. And then so I picked it up again and I tried it again with maybe making some adjustments based on what I saw in that brief moment of release. Um, Only for it to basically crack in half right in front of the wings. And then the wings, the one wing bent at a crease that was already kind of there. It's where the servo and the aileron are cut. So it's kind of a weak spot, which is good. It kind of told me some things there. And then there's enough damage. I'm going to have to rebuild it. So as far as getting a great video of it flying through the air going, whoa, look at that plane. It's amazing. I should build one. It's going to have to wait till I get a chance to print another one out, which might be tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And it may be that's what I build in my second build or my third Build-A-Roy build. I'll see. Anyway,
Okay.
so that was a thing that I did this week as well. Destroyed that plane.
I just don't understand how you continue to spike them like that. Like,
I launch them and they generally go kind of up. I don't know. And then they start to veer down. And
are you upping too hard and stalling them?
I don't know. Well, here's the thing is I don't know if I have the tail at the right angle to begin with. Like, I don't have a model for this thing. This is literally from real flight from a couple pictures and a 3D view, like a 3D view. I don't know how they're aligned. I'm assuming they're level in some parts. And so I think I put the tail, I may have put it too far one way or the other. And so like setting it up level is actually setting it up to tank into the nose, tank down into the ground. Like, I don't know. I don't think so. I didn't think so, but maybe that's the case. I don't know. So we'll see. Yeah. Anyway, so with that, yesterday, we're recording the day after Valentine's Day, and that means that the Build-A-Roy Build-Off 2022 inaugural Build-Off Challenge by the Hangar RC, as co-sponsored by yours truly here at the Aviation RC Noob or the RC After Hours with Andre, is officially at its close, as I understand it. I keep trying to get clarification to see if it got extended, and I have heard nothing back, so I'll assume that everything is closed. So everybody who made submissions and participated in the challenge, thank you so much. I know we had a lot of fun with the guys who were in our Discord group, building along with it. Richard and Tony for sure, along with a couple other guys that I'm probably missing.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, sorry if I'm missing you, but I know those are the guys we were interacting with almost, it felt like daily. Oliver, I know, was working on it. Tail Dragger was doing a couple things. Some good stuff going on there. There's a lot of good conversations, a lot of good encouragement and commiseration when we posted things, both successes and failures. So it was good, and I appreciate everybody kind of being who was part of that, putting in the right kind of spirit. And honestly, if you got a plane most of the way done, it doesn't matter. If you didn't turn it in or whatever, you didn't make a deadline, it's okay. You know what you have? An almost complete plane that you're probably excited about. So finish it up and continue to share the videos. We'd love to see it. And
that's right.
I'm excited to see what the rest of you guys who were in it and got some way down the line. I'd love to see what you end up with in the end. So keep sharing.
Nice. Well, Matt, you were wanting to talk about night flights and such. Why don't you tell us what all goes into that?
All right, so we normally have a plane history section, and so what I'm going to do is actually talk about the history of night flight.
Okay.
And that'll kind of set us up for what we're going to do here with RC, or what I'm going to talk about with RC, which is flying your RC craft as it gets dark, and specifically at night, and what you're allowed to do and all that kind of stuff. So like I said, as I was looking to close up the Marabou, I wanted to make it a plane I could fly at dusk. And so I wanted to have navigational lights on it. And then if it extended, that I would want to make sure to light it. So I want to figure out like what the deal was. And then while I was there, I was like, I I bet you there's a history of flying at night, and it turns out there is. In May 25th of 1910, an American aviator named Richard Brookins and Archibald Hoxsey, these are 19th century names for sure. They're recorded as being the official first night flyers, and they flew in Alabama at Orville Wright's first flight school. And so I guess while they were training, they flew at night. And they were the first ones to do it. So they get the credit. Now, however, at that almost exact same time, within months of each other, all across other parts of the world, in the aviation world, there were people doing pretty much the same thing. And one could argue they might even be earlier. Remember, this was in May. The Americans were credited with the first night flight. However, contenders claimed that on March 1910, French aviator Emile Aubrin, I can't tell if I typoed.
Or Ubrun.
Abrun, yeah, maybe. And flew in Blériot. It's French, so gosh, no. 11 monoplane. And that's one of those ones that's like a bare bones, there's a frame, like a bamboo frame and like a couple canvas pieces to kind of get it flying, and a lot of cord. From Valle Lugano, Argentino. So he was in Argentina. Or was it British aviator Claude Graham White in the early morning of April 23rd, 1910. And he flew from London to Manchester during a mail air race, which was one of the things that's difficult about that era is that, airports weren't lit. There was barely, I don't even know if there was electricity. So there was no electric lights or anything like that. Or if there was, it was pretty limited. The countryside didn't have much. And there was also no radios. At least there were no radios in the planes or anything like that. So you also had I forgot to look, but there's like very limited instrumentation on these planes. So these guys were basically like looking out the side of their plane to see if they're going to hit the ground.
Well, there was electricity, because electricity was the early 1800s, but flight had only been around at this point for 7 years.
Yeah, exactly.
So any airports that were put up were likely just strips in a field.
Right, in a building.
Yeah, like you didn't really have a need for it, so they weren't lit probably.
Right, exactly.
Or if they were, it was, office lighting.
Right. And so they said that basically the way the guy managed to navigate this at night, he had a friendly car he would basically follow their lights along the road for a good portion of it. And then he basically finished the race using the rail station lights. So he followed a rail line and used the station lights to guide him from place to place to place.
Jeez.
I thought that was pretty interesting. I'm like, whoa, yeah, I didn't even think about that. And so this is 5 months before the first ground to air radio transmission that happened in August of that same year. So there are no radio communications or anything like that. You had to I'm coming in. I don't know. I know they had signals and things like that, but basically, yeah. So it was a different world than the one we know today, for sure. And of course, that continued on through World War I, which happened shortly after. One of the advantages of having airtime is if you can fly at night, you can actually see what your troops are up to, or see what your enemy troops are up to, and maybe make surprise bombing raids. And that's essentially what they did. They would also monitor U-boat activity, which there were a handful of German U-boats that they would kind of track to see what they were up to. They'd bomb enemy trenches on both sides. The British had a bunch of critical battles to shoot down German Zeppelins that were coming in, and bombers that attempted to attack Britain. And these nighttime raids actually caused the Zeppelin fleet to be reduced by 79 Zeppelins from a fleet of 123.
Wow.
Which that's significant. So these nighttime attacks were, I guess, easier to keep secret and easier to be surprised, which is a lot harder to maneuver against, for sure. I'm sure they had a bigger impact in World War I that I kind of summarized here, but that was some of the basics. And then, of course, in the era after that, which was a lot of people call the golden era of aviation, this is where there were the barnstormers and the people doing those videos of all the crazy things you could do with flight. Come on and be a pilot, you know. They were the pioneers. Or they also called them the air jockeys. In February 11th, 1911, Frenchman Robert Granzin flew over Paris in a cauldron, a caudron, which is not a cauldron, a caudron.
We're just
which is
having
the
a
type of plane.
great time of it.
Shoot, yeah, go look it up. And they had electric lights. It just basically is a demonstration to show that you could fly at night. It's one of those little single monoplanes, I thought, and it has like that kind of round bowlish front,
Right.
much like the Bristol. Let's see. In July 23rd, 1913, Brandon MB in Canada. It's MB is the Manitoba. Wait, I can't think of the province, but it's one of the provinces in Brandon in Canada. H.W. Blakely flew a biplane with electric lights over a livestock show. So that was an exciting time. That was the first that they did it in Canada. In 1916, American Art Smith toured Asia, and he flew over Japan, over Oyama and Akasuka, Mitsuda, and the royal family, or at least members of
Matthew.
my laptop decided to power down. So
Yeah.
we're gonna try to catch up where I can. We were talking about the air jockeys, and we talked about. I think we were talking about the American who flew over Asia, and he flew over Japan.
There he goes again.
What?
Oh no, you're back. Okay, sorry.
I am back. I haven't ditched out yet. Darn it.
Yeah, no, I guess the internet went between us because I surely thought you're powered down again.
Yikes. Okay, well, no, I didn't power down. Okay, so we're talking about the American who flew over Japan, and he flew over members of the royal family. It was a big, they had emissaries and dignitaries from afar. They were showing off the military might, and there was a bunch of, big much to do about celebrating Japan. And so as part of this, he flew over the celebrations at night, and there were fireworks and all that stuff. And when he landed, he landed to a hero's reception for doing something that I think nobody thought was possible at the time.
Mm-hmm.
In February 22nd, 1921, Jack Knight flew the U.S. mail from North Platte to Omaha, Nebraska. And freezing weather. It was like, if you know what the middle of America is in February, it is awful cold. I mean, cold doesn't even begin to tell you about it. It's awful cold. Wind chill's crazy. Anyway, so he navigated by bonfires lit by local farmers. And he was the only one of several pilots to succeed in the effort. So there were a number of people. What
happened to the other guys?
Yeah, didn't go into too much detail about that. It just indicated that he was the only one who made it. So I'm guessing either people just said, this sucks, I'm out. And I'm hoping that was the outcome and not something a little bit more grim.
Yeah.
And then, when you think about the hurdles to this kind of effort, it was, there's no satellite maps. Nobody really had aerial images at all. The communications were nil or limited. Weather was basically what you knew. You couldn't call ahead to the next airport and see what's going on over there. You had to fly by what you visually remembered. There weren't a bunch of, I don't think there were too many aerial maps or anything like that. I mean, there might have been.
Any aerial maps would have been
township maps, surveys.
Yeah, rough. I mean, but rough at best. I mean,
yeah.
We think of our aerial maps, or even like the maps that we grew up with as kids, like, oh, those were old maps, and we unfold them and all, but even those were extremely detailed and accurate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and to think that they didn't have those.
Yeah, it's Farmer John's territory over there, all 506 acres, like that whole section. We don't worry about that. So there's not, especially there's probably not going to be very many landmarks noted, visual landmarks, where we've learned to like, hey, those are cell towers. That's a lake. These are things you will see from the sky and be able to see them at, thousands of feet up, what we think is important land base is not the same as when you're up in the air, about what you can see and use for visual reference. Anyway, the other thing is comfort, man. It's cold up there. Those pilots had to bundle up like they were going to be in a blizzard for about a week.
Yeah.
And so they had to make it through the wind chill. And I mean, I keep thinking of A Christmas Story when the mother dresses the little brother like a tick. Like 600 layers of stuff.
I don't
And
think
he's
I've
like, I
seen
can't put
that.
my arms down.
I don't think I've seen it.
Oh, it's a good one. Anyway, great Christmas movie. Anyway,
Okay.
and then the other thing is that the airfields weren't that many. In those days, they weren't all over the place. Like right now, you can go to almost every other township and find an airfield somewhere.
hmm
And every major city has one. So
And if not, for some reason, the interstates and highways,
Yep.
interstates specifically, were designed to have straight sections every so many number of miles to set down on.
Yep, in any emergency, right? And then, now, granted, these planes were made for. They weren't made for runway takeoffs. They were made for grass field takeoffs. They're a little bit more rugged in that sense, but still, it just wasn't the same kind of landscape as it is today, or even in World War II. So it's just something to think about when these achievements were happening in the early teens of the turn of the century. And then, of course, there was the first nighttime air passenger service, which happened in 1926, May 1st, by the Deutsche Post, so German Post, and they went from Berlin to Königsberg, which is basically like a Russian Baltic enclave of Kaliningrad, is what it's called, or Kaliningrad now. And that I looked at where that was, and that's basically to the northeast of Poland, along the Baltic Sea, and it's southwest of Lithuania. It's kind of sandwiched between those two countries along the Baltic Sea. So if you take Sweden and go to the right across the Baltic Sea in there, it's kind of like
when you hit Sweden, turn right.
Yeah, turn right. I know, that's pretty rough. Anyway, so a newly formed Deutschen Lufthansa, which I think you'll recognize the Lufthansa, they basically used this mail route that was done by the Post Service, and they ended up basically using that to create a nightly service that went from Berlin to Moscow. So basically, the Post Service would move the mail, but they'd also carry passengers too, I guess, to make it somewhat more profitable, or not being a completely losing endeavor. And then they used that airway and that familiarity to be able to extend that out basically about twice as far to the capital of Moscow. So that was pretty neat. Then there was a first transatlantic flight, and that was done in a year later. So April 16th and 17th, it was a 2-day travel, a 2-day trek from in 1927 by Portuguese aviator Jose Manuel Sarmento, and he was a military officer, if I recall right, and Sarmento de Beers. There's a lot of words I'm not familiar with. I'm so sorry if I'm butchering your language, so I apologize. They went from Baloma, Portuguese Guinea, and then to Portuguese Guinea. Sorry, so from Baloma to Portuguese Guinea, in a Dornier DOJ Wall seaplane. Now this was the same seaplane that was used, not same plane, but the same type of plane that was used to attempt to reach the North Pole in 1925, a couple of years prior.
Okay.
I got a little picture of that for Joe to see, and it's basically a pusher-puller engine pod on top of wing, with basically a big boat plane. So that, yeah, and that was like one of those things where they had engine trouble and they had to stop and they had to get it repaired and continue on their journey and stuff like that. So, not that they had the trouble in the middle of the Atlantic, but they did have some trouble, and it wasn't the first time that it had been attempted, and whoever it is had to abort because of some sort of trouble, that they had to get rescued by boat. Rescued in the sense like, they had to get whatever fixed, and kind of stop their journey. And then that kind of brings us to, I'll call it after World War One and all the air jockey stuff. And then we started getting to kind of the 1930s, which is like the golden age of aviation. This is where aviation started to actually become shown as a viable business, and people started investing, and it became a more regular thing. And so in 1930s, electric runway lights were put in Cleveland, Ohio, in the U.S. Movies were those movies of the flying circuses and stuff like that in the prior years. So basically, I'm trying to like, so what they used to do to land on an airfield to see what the heck they were doing at night, they would either put spotlights on the wings, like hang spotlights from the wings, or they would drop flares and then land by those.
Oh, wow.
So, and then they're putting runway lights on the airfield itself made a big difference.
Mhm.
Air routes became like established in that period of time. American Airway beacons were put on mountaintops. So basically, they were just tall, those like watchtowers that you see in the forests. They'd
Yeah.
basically be a bunch of those, but they'd be along the air routes, and then they would light a beacon, an electric beacon, so that planes could see where the heck they're supposed to fly at night.
Sort of the before instrumentation, are they
Mhm.
VOR stations?
Yes, before the VORs and all that. Yeah. So you didn't know like where am I supposed to go? Because you
Right.
can't see the next airport. Yeah, and so they would use these kind of things. The air routes were not only established within the country, but they were established between the countries. So in European countries, they were also kind of brought about by the need for European countries to get out to their European colonies in Africa and Asia. Major airlines made travel more comfortable, and they try to make it like trains. So they would include, they realized at night they could actually include moving pictures. And they had their first demonstration that it wasn't too noisy on a plane to be able to hear a movie. And it became a standard luxury, and probably one of the reasons why we still watch movies on planes today.
See, I would beg to differ because I have been on a passenger plane
Yeah.
that was way too noisy.
Oh, yeah, I know. But I'm just saying, they were like, they're like, there's no way. It couldn't possibly work. And I guess they figured out a way to make it at least enjoyable. I don't know.
Well, original. I mean, moving pictures, movies back then, depending, didn't have sound to begin with. So
Yeah,
were
nice.
they sounds at this point? Like, did they have audio?
I thought that. So I'm trying to think. So the era of Scott Joplin, who's a pianist who basically did a lot of his work was done for moving pictures, and it was in the early 20s and late teens. So the moving picture went from a silent film with musical accompaniment to something that you could actually watch and listen to within a short period of time. It was about 5 to 10 years.
Okay,
It's very
yeah, the 20s.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at all of his works, like it's a 8-year period, and that was because that's when people needed music to go with their movies, as opposed to actually just watching the movie and the sound that went with it. Anyway, so they would do that. That would be one of the luxuries. And they would set it up to be like a train. They would have, beds, and they'd have all these other things. And they would even have, and they had electric lights. And all of a sudden you could actually be comfortable and you could see what you were doing. You could actually read a book or whatever it was you were going to do while you were traveling. And that's the other thing is they flew low. Like they didn't fly at high altitudes and they weren't very fast. So your trips took a while and they weren't necessarily the most smooth trip in the world. That's part of the reason why airliners go up as high as they do. They go over the cloud layers and it significantly smooths out the trip. So they were basically going at about maybe 250 miles an hour max. And like today's jets go over 500 miles an hour. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a much slower trip. And of course, tickets were prohibitively expensive. You needed to be very wealthy to be able to afford a ticket on an airline. But as you know, like with regularity and familiarity, prices of everything kind of drop and it becomes more accessible. Then airports become worth building, and and then all of a sudden air travel becomes something that anybody can use, as we see in the coming decades, right?
Mhm.
So that pretty much, that brings us to almost World War II. And then at that point, I think we'll just kind of leave it to what the histories we've talked about. Night flight continues to be a thing, and it certainly is one of the tactics that's used in warfare to, make operations unseen, right? As best as you can.
Right.
Night is still the preferred way to do it. So anyway, I'll leave it there as a history. We may continue that part of it, or we may just leave it at that, because I think at that point it becomes a little less exotic and unusual and interesting. I feel like it becomes a little bit more mundane in the things we know, as we know it today,
Right.
There are definitely certainly innovations, and maybe we'll touch on them separately as we go, but that's it for the histories.
Okay. So now on to proper RC night flying?
Yeah, let's talk about the RC night flying. One of the things that, while I was looking at it, I'm like, okay, well, what do we need to do to comply with the regulations at hand? What are they? Who's imparting them? And what do they mean for us when we're building our planes? Like, what should we have in mind? I'm not going to talk about, I'm going to talk basically about ways you can do these things, but we'll go into detail some other time about what products I would select, maybe, and it's pretty straightforward, but at the same point, there's a little bit of nuance and all that stuff too. So we'll get into that separately, but let's talk about the regulations. So as I read it, let's start with the big guys at the top. And I apologize for anybody in other countries, but I know a lot of these regulatory agencies have very similar restrictions or guidelines regarding aviation. It seems to be pretty consistent across the board. Now, it's a little different in different places, but it's pretty close. So I'm going to go over the FAA rules because I have them in front of me, and that's what I looked up today and yesterday. So let's talk about that. So it seems like basically for the FAA, recreational flying, you are required to follow the safety guidelines of an FAA recognized community-based organization, which is loosely identified as people kind of like AMA. Now, that's not official, wording or anything like that. But basically, whatever your community requires of you, do that and make sure you're safe. And that's really kind of all they talk about. I mean, there really isn't a whole lot that goes into it, but recreational flying is purely flying for fun. You're not getting any monetary gain or anything like that. There's a very kind of limited window what that is, but that's most of anybody in the RC community who's just going out on the weekend having a blast, or during the week, just going out to have fun.
Right.
You're not doing it as a business. You're not you're trying to sell a product. You're trying to make money off of it. Now, when it comes down to making money, then it falls under different jurisdictions. It's not recreational flying. It is, as we call it here, Part 107. That is the regulatory section, the title of our, let's see, it's the title of our Code of Federal Regulations that governs, for-profit unmanned aerial systems. So it says it prohibits the operations of unmanned aerial operation or unmanned aerial systems at night, which is defined as the time between the end of evening civil twilight and the beginning of morning civil twilight, which is 30 minutes before and after dawn, respectively. Dawn and dusk. So 30 minutes after dusk or 30 minutes before dawn, as published by the Air Almanac, converted to local time. To do any kind of night flying, you will need to request a 107.29 waiver as a night waiver. The actual name of the waiver is a daylight operations waiver. It's basically saying that you're only allowed to operate in daylight, and you're asking them to waive this restriction. To do so, you'll need to provide the following information. And this is according to FAA.com. Oh, wait, that's not FAA.com. That is, okay. Where did I put that reference? It's a website. We'll provide the reference down below. Yeah, I believe it's droneregistration.net. It's how to fly your drone at night legally, part 107 night waiver is the thing. And we'll have a link in the description down below. So basically, what you do is you provide the following information. You are requesting a waiver, or which there's a difference. An airspace authorization is a short term, and it's 6 months. So you may actually be requesting an authorization. If you're requesting a waiver, it's a longer time, between 6 months and 2 years, and it grants access to a bigger operating area. So if you're looking for small stuff, it's typically an authorization. If you're looking for a larger, longer term stuff, it's, especially if you have like a larger job and you need to do things at night, like if you're doing a construction site and that kind of thing, you're going to want a waiver. So it's worth noting that most of these requests to fly in controlled airspace that we hear about have to do with airspace authorizations and not the waivers. So typically when you are going for this, you're going to be requesting authorizations. That's why we kind of went over those definitions. But basically, you're going to be providing a method. You want to show that as you fill out the forms in the FAA registration for the request, you're going to provide a method that the remote pilot can maintain visual line of sight during the darkness hours. Now, if I remember right, when we went through all the regulations that are proposed, there is a whole section on night flying, and we did cover a lot of that stuff. And it requires basically providing a light that's visible for 3 statute miles, and et cetera. There's a whole list, and we covered that before, and we will cover it again, but I did not cover it here because this is what's currently what the current regulations are for at least the next year and a half or 2 years. You'll also need to provide a method for the remote pilot to see and avoid other aircraft, people on the ground, or ground-based structures and obstacles during the darkness. So basically, you need to be aware of what your surroundings are and anything you might run into, and show them that you can do that from your remote location. You also need to provide a method by which the remote pilot will be able to continuously know and determine the position, altitude, and attitude and movement of their small unmanned aircraft. So like an INAV map system that has all the information, indicating that it's one of those kind of systems will probably be what you'll have to do with that. Anticipate safety questions, and you're going to want to answer them in that section. So given that technology can fail, what are you going to do to make sure that the connection to your drone isn't lost? So, if my connection is a 433 megahertz connection through iNav from my computer to the flight controller, how am I going to make sure that if the battery dies on a laptop, what am I going to do? Do I have a backup? Like mine did today? Like, what am I going to do to make sure that if that fails, how am I going to know what's going on with my drone? Or what if my controller goes or whatever, right? You want to address those there. Having one or more visual observer is also a good way to address the guidelines, saying like, I'm not the only person looking. Not only that, but I've got a guy over there and I've got a person over there. And we also have radio contact over this way, just in case everything goes wrong. You want to make sure to describe that how you'll communicate with those people. Is it going to be radio? Or is it going to be standing loud, close enough where you can talk to them directly? And you want to be very specific here. The more specific, the more likely they'll grant the waiver or grant the authorization. Lastly, there's 2 more. You want to provide a method to assure that everybody who's participating in the AUS, the small unmanned aircraft operations, have all the knowledge to be able to recognize and overcome the illusions that happen, visual illusions that happen at night. And that's is more going, when you look at full scale piloting, they cover like, hey, if you're stuck in the dark in your plane and you're still flying, you haven't been able to get down, you have to be aware that these are problems, and I'll cover them in a second, that occur, and you need to be able to understand what they are and how to kind of avoid them. So visual illusions are caused by darkness, understanding psychological conditions that might possibly degrade night vision. So let's see. Night illusions, officially, that refers to the tricks that the eye can play on you at night. They can also cause confusion during night flights. They can also make sure that you address how you're going to deal with these illusions and how you're going to remedy situations such as flying for shorter periods of time, maybe using a window of time to allow your eyes to adjust. So basically that way you're not like stuck in the goggles the whole time or something. Um, and basically making sure that when you turn on the lights and you essentially go night blind for a minute, that you're giving yourself enough time to adjust to get back into normal vision. And you plan to deal with, and then explain how you're going to deal with these night illusions. I'll kind of list them. These are the kind of the big ones. There's a big list, but, and I have a couple references here. We may put them down below, but basically autokinesis, which is phantom motion, which is like a protracted staring, may cause things to appear to move that aren't actually moving the way they look like they're moving. It's just kind of like when you're staring at something too long, it looks like it's going somewhere and it's not, or it's going a different direction than it is. Fixation, or fascination. It's basically when you just like stare at the one thing that you're looking at. Like for you, I mean, it's like looking at a drone, right? Like I'm looking at my drone. I want to make sure I'm looking at my drone. I got to see my drone. I want to see where it's going, right? Well, when you ignore the orientation cues and their fixed position because you have something you're trying to do. So you basically ignore things because you're too busy focused on what you're trying to do or on a specific object. Reversible perspective illusion. So it's the inability to determine if an object is moving forward or away from you. And at night, when you're pretty far away and it's just literally a series of dots of light, it becomes a little bit more difficult to be able to discern forward or back. So it's something to be aware of. Size distance illusion. So dimly lit objects appear to be further away than brightly lit objects and that appear closer. But if you've got, let's say, a plane and maybe your battery's dying and the light starts to dim, even though it's in the same spot, you go, oh no, it's going away, like it's flying away. Well, you need to know that that's a possibility, that's a trick that's happening. It's not actually what's going on. And describing like, oh no, I'm going to check my iNav. I'm going to make sure that I'm looking at all the things that are going on. And then lastly, one of the items that they have listed is flicker vertigo, which are flashing lights may cause nausea or disorientation. So I don't know that I've ever had any of that stuff, but they're definitely certain. I could see how those are things that happen, especially when you're trying to focus on a task in basically pure blindness or pure darkness, except the bright lights that are, identifying or illuminating your plane or aircraft, quad, whatever. And then lastly, the fifth thing that you want to provide when you're putting in for these authorizations is provide a method to increase the conspicuousness of the small unmanned aircraft so they can be seen at a distance of at least 3 statute miles. And that's basically 3 miles. Statute is just the official measurement. 3 statute miles unless a system is in place that can avoid all non-participating aircraft. I'm not sure how, like maybe we're doing it in a building. Maybe it's being flown below a tree line in a field. So it's very likely that it'll be, in contact with any non-participating aircraft might be a way to identify that, depending on your situation. So those are things you kind of want to make sure if you're putting in for the 107 waiver, make sure to include those things. Make sure you identify the problems ahead of time and identify how you're going to mitigate those. They want to make sure that you are keenly aware of what risks you're taking and that you've thought ahead and are planning for them so that if they do happen, you're aware of them and it won't be an actual issue. So that's the FAA's side of this. And of course, obviously with the recreation, it just kind of says, just look at your community-based organization, whatever they're okay with, we'll probably be okay. So if you're not making money at what you're doing, let's talk about what the AMA has. And this is basically, I pulled from like a law enforcement guide PDF. And I double checked, like these are in the regulations the AMA put out, but, or the guidelines that they put out. But this is basically to inform police officers and law enforcement people about what to look for, I guess, for night flying. And this, I pulled it kind of as an excerpt. It's a number 6 in the document. It's a PDF. We'll link it below in the description. And it says unmanned aerial systems or drone night flight operations. is number 6. So I think it's a couple pages in. AMA remote pilots may fly drones or UASs at night when done in accordance with AMA's night flying requirements. The remote pilots of the aircraft must utilize an onboard lighting system that allows the pilot to clearly see the unmanned aerial system and discern its orientation and attitude by means of colored lights and or oriented light scheme. Flights must not be conducted over any people or at locations where there is no chance, or at a location that there is no chance of people entering the designated flight area. Altitudes are to be limited to 400 feet above ground level. LED lights, lighting that show up in best in total darkness. So it is recommended that they're not flown at dusk, which was news to me before a little bit ago. FAA authorization. FAA authorized by public law section 112 or 112-95, section 336, part C, when following a community-based organization AMA safety guidelines, or it says in parentheses AMA, but any CBO. So if you're following the Flight Test Community Association, you're a member, and they have guidelines on night flying, the FAA says as long as you're doing it in that safe manner, that's acceptable. 107 or non-CBO remote pilots, recreational operations, may not operate as SUAS at night. So you can't operate an unmanned aerial system at night if you're not part of one of them. Not FAA authorized, FAA UAS Part 107 or unmanned aerial system daylight only operations, official sunrise to official sunset, local time, must apply for a certificate of waiver. So if you don't belong to those, you can put in for a certificate of waiver issued in accordance with Title 14, Code of Federal Regulations, Section 107.2, and provide justification that the operation can be done safely and conducted by satisfying performance-based standards. So basically, you have to do what we just talked about with the Part 107. Even if you aren't a Part 107 pilot, you're a recreational flyer, you don't belong to AMA, or you're not at an AMA field, or any other community-based organizations, which, by the way, have not been identified by the FAA. So technically, we're all kind of flying not in a CBO because none have been identified. And then basically, you'll have to put in for a permit, put in for a waiver. So, I mean, those are the regulations. I know that's kind of so all of that being said is either you're going to have to put in a waiver, but basically if you're going to do it through AMA guidelines, you just need to make sure that you can tell what direction your plane is going, that you can see it, and that you can make sure that it's not going to be endangering anybody. Is what I take from it. And it was a lot all at once. Joe, do you have any questions about that?
I mean, I don't know. I trust you did a good job explaining that, because basically once we got into the Part 107 and we got a couple minutes into that, before, based on your notes, where you even got into airspace authorizations and waivers, Skype cut out on us. I thought your laptop lost power again. So yeah, I was sitting here for a while just like, all right, he'll eventually call me back.
Yeah, I didn't see the Skype quit on me. I was like, what in the heck? Anyway, and then I was also indicating basically if you're not a CBO remote pilot or 107, or you're flying under 107, you need to put in a waiver if you're doing night flying.
Okay.
So one of the advantages of being part of a CBO is that if you're following their night flight, guidelines, you are authorized by the FAA to do so.
Okay. Well, cool. Well, anything that you had gone over before, I'll be able to hear again more than once during editing. So
Yeah, you will. Well, I'm just saying, is there any questions you have about like, and what I wanted to do now is to just quickly go over what the lighting schemes, or basically how you light commercial aircraft, or how commercial aircraft are lit. And with that, we can take that as a tip of one way you can light your aircraft, especially if you're looking for a scale look or anything like that.
yeah, go for it.
Okay. And so basically what you'll see is that a lot of the navigation lights follow the naval navigation lights,
Mhm.
where the left or port side of the aircraft is red and the starboard or right side of the craft shows green, and that there's typically a white light on the top, or at least on the end and the aft, so at the back of the craft. So if it's going away from you, you'll see a white steady light, and at the top of the mast you'll either see a beacon or a blinking light at the top.
Mhm.
And then you'll either see red or green and red, or red and green, depending on if it's coming away or going towards you, or if you're looking at the left or right side of the boat. So, starboard or port side of the boat.
Okay.
And then, of course, if it's coming at you and it's got the landing lights on, which are required for, for taxiing and coming in for landings and takeoffs, you'll see those will be shooting forward. And I find that as an RCer, I've seen some planes with that. And that's really helpful to know, yes, that plane is coming at me. So one of the things that's also interesting is that commercial aircraft have strobe lights on the back side of the wing. So those red and green lights actually shine only forward. And then the back lights are actually white strobe lights. So if you're looking from the back side of the craft, from basically the wing back, you will see a white steady light on the back and a strobe light on each wingtip. And then what you'll oftentimes see also is a red strobe on either the underside or the top tail of the light. And basically those go on when the engines are on and it's moving. It's basically to indicate to ground crew that this aircraft is lit up, baby. So watch out. And it may be moving, and to be aware that it's not just stationary on the ground.
Mhm.
And so those are the kind of lights, and by mimicking those, it does make a pretty straightforward way of discerning, is it going, left, right, forward, away from you, toward you, and that kind of stuff. And I find that even if you've got really powerful LEDs, and there's a couple kits out there that are very powerful, even at dusk, they make a big difference. As you and I have both found out the hard way, everything becomes a silhouette in the sky. If you've got a couple lights that show up in that silhouette, you might still be able to fly that thing successfully to the ground
Yeah.
without going, oh gosh, what's it doing?
Mhm.
So these might have been helpful a couple nights we were out there. And honestly, if I can find a couple ways to do this pretty easily, I might, recommend that basically we get a couple systems built up and we just make sure that we put them on each plane as we build them.
Yeah, it would definitely have to be something that was easily and quickly insertable.
Right. I'm thinking maybe Velcro based or magnetized, as far as being able to stick it to the plane kind of deal.
Oh yeah, like maybe it runs externally of the plane, like you're just running it on the outside.
Yeah, maybe that's it. So we'll see. One of the common ways, and you could look up, there's a number of videos on YouTube of people kind of coming up with different systems. And what's neat about looking at those, if you're not really sure which system you might want to do, is look at like how it looks in the air. Like they'll have videos of how it looks as it's flying past and things like that. If you've been to Flight Fest and you've seen the night flights, Joe, you've seen what LED strips can do to a white Adams Ready board plane. It lights that thing up like a Christmas tree. And depending on which LED set, if it's a 12 volt or a 5 volt or 12 volts, those things are bright. And the 5 volts, and of course it depends on the strip. We'll get into that. But basically, you buy those strip LED strips, and they run off either the voltage from a BEC or they run off of the battery direct, and you're good to go. And then you could use for the pinpoint lights, you could use those either 3mm or 5mm LEDs, the traditional LEDs that you see that have been used forever. Or you can even get as little like the SMDs, the little diodes that are mounted on like the little surface chips. They're really tiny. They're the kinds like they get used in like the itty bitty remote control cars, the 1/87th scale kind of little guys.
I had some RGB LEDs at one time because Buddy and I were going to do some experimenting. And they were a little like white puck.
Yeah,
had the arms coming off of them.
Yeah. Oh, okay, yeah, I've seen those too. Those are typically individual LED, like addressable LEDs. And that's the other thing is, and we'll get into it later when we get into it. But they're not every LED is made equal.
Oh yeah.
Some of them can be addressable, and it's RGB addressable. So it's like one chip or one cob. Is what they call it because it looks yellow. Some of the whites. And basically what they'll do is, you can put them in series, and through a flight controller, I think Betaflight has like a whole section on LEDs. So you can light your quad a certain way, right? And you can also have it like during different arm situations, it will light differently. So that way you can see visually what's going on when you're flipping switches.
Okay.
You can see it on your thing. Well, that's something you can also do on your plane if you put a flight controller in it. A lot of people will, rather than do a flight controller and get into all that, they'll get into Arduino, maybe because they use it or they know it or they found a tutorial, and they'll use that to basically load lighting because Arduino has a lot of lighting programs. They'd use the strips and addressable RGBs. And there's advantages and disadvantages to that. I know at some point I want to make a plane. This is so dumb, and it certainly strikes my age. I want one to be like a Knight Rider plane, or like a Cylon where the red goes back and forth across the front of the plane.
Ooh.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Like a fly, like an arrow. You know what I mean? And it's just like, woo, woo, and it would have to. I'd probably have to get a speaker set to make that have that noise. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it wouldn't be able to be one of those little piezo speakers because those little things are.
Yeah. Well, it'd have to be amplified a little bit. I don't know. It'll be fun. But those are, I mean, and as we've seen at Flight Fest, I mean, I saw somebody who made like a nut ball that had Pac-Man on one side and a Blinky Ghost on the other, and he would flip it, and it would turn into like one of those ones where the power pellet got eaten. You know what I mean? I'm like, whoa, that's crazy. But really, your imagination could be your limit. At a certain point. So it's something I'm definitely going to dabble into and get a little bit more into as we go. There's a number of planes like the P-61 I want to light up in a certain way. Oh, and the other things you can do, even those little finger lights you get from the dollar store for the kids. Like, when you're doing a night outing, you get these little LEDs that have they have a switch and a battery and an LED, and that's pretty much all they are. And they have like a little elastic strip that goes around your finger. And so the kids are like, I'm pointing you with a laser. And it's like, it's just an LED. But
wow.
But
I've not seen these, but it doesn't surprise me.
I've got a whole 100 pack of them because I figured I could light a couple planes with them, string them up and have some fun with it.
Right.
I don't know. And I figured, put a couple in a wing, and all of a sudden now you have orientation. So we'll see. But that's something to look forward to as we go forward. But in the meantime, just something to think about. If you haven't thought about it, it's possible. But with limitations. And that's it. Otherwise, the links we'll put in the show notes. There's a number of them there. If we missed one, reach out to us. Just give us an email and say, hey, what'd you do there? And we'll see if we can't get that to you really quick. If there's anything you'd like to, when we get towards the lighting, if you want, ask us to cover a certain specific topic or detail about that, please reach out. Let us know. We want to know what you would love to hear more about.
Okay. Well, anything else on that front?
No, nothing on that. Do you have any questions?
Well, again, I wasn't here for a lot of it, so.
Well, okay. I mean, but the general topic. Is there anything you would like to you're interested about with LEDs in the planes you have?
And not so much. I mean, nothing comes to mind right away. But
Okay.
yeah, I haven't thought too much about putting lights in my planes.
Other
It's
than
just
going, boy, it sure would be nice to have some way to tell which way that plane's going.
yeah, or oh boy, it sure would be nice if I had a couple LEDs on the fogey so we could fly
Mhm.
with the night radians.
Oh my, yeah, that'll be a lot of fun. And I
Those night
think,
radians were beautiful.
oh my gosh, they are. They do such a good job. And honestly, I think that's worth doing. You and I putting that together.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I think so that about I guess that wraps it up for this today. Really, are we going to do anything? What's on your workbench? What are you looking forward to getting into next?
Well, for the next little bit, I'm going to be continuing to dive headfirst into quad stuff. Specifically trying to I gotta figure out how to fly this one.
Mm-hmm.
Play around with it a bit, figure out how to work the camera and all, which I did a hover test in the driveway and mess with the camera a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But just figure that all out and what all I want to do with that. So, I mean, that's sort of tangentially related because it's not, I guess, maybe the kind of quads that I thought that I would initially get into. But,
Yeah.
um,
Also, what I'm sure at some point when maybe we'll start picking your brain about, you know, what kind of business opportunities that might bring or whatever. I know you've been thinking about that kind of thing as you went, wait, this is an opportunity.
yeah. Well, I mean, the thought behind getting that was how do I branch into another area of the hobby without it hitting the bank quite so hard, and that was to try to make a little profit off of whatever I'm doing with it. So that's sort of what that's going for, and I'll see what I can do with it, and we'll talk about it periodically.
Good.
Other than that, maybe somewhere in a mix of all that, redoing the fuse of the Nubatros so I can get in there and change that coupler out, and then I still got the 7 sitting over there.
Okay.
Waiting to go.
Yeah,
and
I forgot you're almost done with that.
I'm almost done with it. I got to do the cockpit, the wing tips, and then get electronics in it.
Okay. And,
so it's really not that far away.
I will make sure to share the landing gear picture. I think you've seen it, but look closely at the landing gear picture I have for the Javelin, because that'll identify kind of what you need to do to put landing gear on that plane too. Because I thought that came out really well and made it pretty clear, like how to do it. It's pretty simple, and it seems to work really well. So good. All right, cool. I don't know what I'm gonna be. Just I've got Bilgeroy. It's still February, so I've got about 20 or 15 planes to cut out and have ready for this coming weekend for STEM night. I've also got Bilgeroy to build like crazy still and try to fly some of these planes that I've been putting together. And I've just had a couple things that kind of put some of it on hold. So I'm going to have to be building full real quick. So I'm going to be doing that. So next time you hear, hopefully it'll be, should be about the end of Bilgeroy. With any luck, I'll have reported some successes, hopefully a lot. If not, it'll be a lot of fun. It's honestly one of the things I look forward to about it is the community that kind of springs up and says, I'm in, and all the fun that we get to have, like as we kind of build together and share our experiences. That's really what it's about. Anyway, so that we'll talk about that next time.
All right. Well,
let's get out of here, Joe.
Let's say we covered everything. Got anything else?
No, right now I got nothing. If you have any questions, just, write in, let us know. Let us know if there's anything you want us to try to clarify, or maybe if there's anything we got wrong, let us know what kind of knuckleheads we are so we can help everybody else understand what's the right way.
There you go. Well, guys, as always, we appreciate you tuning in and listening. Hopefully you've enjoyed this conversation as much as Matthew enjoyed monologuing.
I didn't mean to.
Well, again, power went out, Skype dropped.
Oh,
not your fault.
It's not our normal episode that way.
No. Yes, feel free to reach out to us, aviationrcnoob@gmail.com, or Matthew at aviationrcnoob.com, or Joe at joe@aviationrcnoob.com. And I'm just off kilter from my normal outro. at this point because we.
You know how to reach out to us. Get a hold of us. Let us know what you're thinking. Let us know what you'd like to hear. Let us know if you have any questions you want us to answer. Come back next week or next time and hear us talk about what are we going to talk about next time, you think?
I couldn't even tell you. We hadn't talked about that yet.
No, we haven't. I don't know, but it'll be good. So come on in and listen. It'll be a good time. Thanks for listening. Guys.